The Application Lifecycle Risk Management Podcast, Episode 37, SpecFlowStrategies. A while ago, I wrote an article explaining what SpecFlow is and why you might want to use it. Now, I've been using SpecFlow for several months now, and I've recognized several patterns that have emerged in my usage that I wish I'd known when I started, so I thought I'd share them with you today. First, keep your features small. If you're used to using BDD or even unit testing, this will be obvious. But if you're new to all of this, the temptation is going to be to put all of your tests in one feature. While this works in the strictest sense of the word, and you are at least getting tests in place, you will find that finding a specific test later on is going to be rather awkward. A feature file should really only have a few scenarios that are testing a particular feature in the system. And this is why, at the top of your feature file, you're stating what exactly the feature is you're trying to test. For example, as an administrator, I need to be able to delete existing users so they cannot access the system anymore, which we would probably put in the delete user feature file. Now that we've specified the feature, we need one or more scenarios for this. Now each scenario is going to test the various ways you might be able to delete a user. Maybe you can check boxes and delete them all at once, or you can click one button per user and delete them one at a time. Each of those is a scenario. So your scenarios might look something like, scenario, delete one user at a time. Given I have 10 users in the system, and I have logged in as an administrator, and I have navigated to the user administration page, when I click the first delete user button, then I only have 9 users in the system, and I remain on the user admin page. Another scenario might be delete one user at a time with checkbox. Given I have 10 users in the system, and I have logged in as an administrator, and I have navigated to the user admin page, when I click the checkbox of the first user, and I click the delete check user button, then I only have 9 users in the system, and I remain on the user admin page. Scenario, multiple users checked at a time, etc. So what about sad path scenarios? You'll need to determine if those are another feature or if they are somehow part of the feature you're working on. For this test, I can't think of a sad path test for deleting users that is generally applicable, but most of the time, if you have something that should occur as part of deleting a user, you should be doing that as part of the delete process. The second issue that I see is repeating yourself. You're likely to make the mistake as you learn to use SpecFlow, as you start out thinking of the feature file, the step implementations for the feature, and the setup or teardown of the scenario as all one unit. As a result of this, you'll tend to implement the steps and the setup and the teardown, what SpecFlow implements as before and after, all in one file. The problem with this is that you'll end up putting a lot of duplicate code in your test. So let's say each of your features have similar setup code that you need to implement. In the case of our user administration example that we just started out with, you'll have code you need to implement for adding a user, deleting a user, adding roles to a user, searching for a user, and probably some other stuff. And for each of those, your before code is all going to look the same. So what I would recommend that you do is create a separate file with your before and after code in it, and nothing more. You will associate this file with your feature files by associating a category with it and using the category in your feature files. Now, for each feature, the same before and after code will run. The other issue you're going to have is that you're going to have a lot of the same steps being used between feature files. However, in my experience, there will be a lot more common features between the code I write for a particular screen than there will be for the before and after code I write. For example, I might write before code for various roles. As a regular user, when I visit the user administration screen, I should not be able to view any users other than myself. Now that will require different setup code from as an administrator, but the steps to implement the scenarios will probably be very similar. Therefore, you should have a step file that holds all of the steps for a screen full of logic and a file separate from your before and after logic. And again, you'll associate these two using categories. Don't forget to rate this show in iTunes and Stitcher. What's Stitcher? Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favorite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment, and sports shows. Create custom playlists. Available on the iOS, Android, and Nook. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And for the links to items mentioned in this podcast, make sure you check out my blog at blog.dmbcllc.com. A link to this article is in the show description.